Story 1. My grandmother recently gifted me her house as a present for starting college. She had it documented in her will, so now I have the deed and all legal rights to the property. I have been living there for 3 months now, and I'm enjoying the peace and space I have. It's nice to come and go as I please, invite whoever I want, and decorate the house the way I like. It's a new feeling for me, as it had been a while since I had this kind of autonomy. When I was 14, my father married my stepmother. She came with her 4 children, all under 10 years old. Suddenly, the house was filled with people, opinions, and demands. I had to give up my room because they needed the space. That wasn't my decision. My room had been decorated by my late mother, who had passed away 6 years before my father's marriage. That room always reminded me of her. It was a piece of her I could hold on to, and I wasn't happy to give that up. I thought my father would understand, but instead, he called me selfish. He said my step-siblings were still grieving the loss of their father, who had passed away 5 years prior, and they had been through tough times since then. He said giving up the room was a small thing that could make their lives easier and help them adjust to the new home. From then on, it became a pattern, with my father constantly prioritizing the needs and desires of his children over mine. The rest of the family was not happy with how my father handled this situation. I eventually got used to it, but I ended up moving out a few months ago. My new house is a few bus stops away from the family home, so it's convenient for everyone. It allows me to be close to the people and places I grew up with while having my independence. Since my father found out about my new house, he and my stepmother always bring up the topic of space at home when I'm around. They always mention it as if they were just thinking aloud, saying they don't have enough space at home, that my house is bigger, that they don't have privacy because of the kids, and that sharing with family is always a good thing, and so on. I could tell where the conversation was going, but I never got involved, not even with a nod or raised eyebrow. One day, however, my father called and said they were sending the 2 oldest twin children, aged 15, to live with me because their house was too crowded. It felt like they were tired of insinuations. I categorically refused. It was almost like I was vacating my room again. Whenever I had something that was just mine, they wanted me to give it up. I wasn't happy the first time, and I wasn't happy when my father asked that question, but at least now the house was fully mine, and I was mature enough to say no, without being manipulated into doing something I didn't want. So, my father called me selfish, just like the first time, and said I should look at the big picture. He argued that it would be good to have the twins living with me so that I wouldn't be living alone in case of an emergency, and it would really help the whole family. But I didn't give in, and made it clear that they were not welcome in my house. I thought that would be the end of it, but one day, when I came home after college, I found the 2 boys at my doorstep with their suitcases. I can tell you I was furious. It went beyond any limit. I immediately called my father to question what the hell was going on, how he could completely ignore my wishes like that. He acted as if we had never had a conversation about it before, as if we had never discussed the matter. Many things were said in that discussion. In the end, I held my ground and refused to let the boys in, asking them to leave. They refused and even tried to argue with me, but it was already late, and they needed a place to sleep. They finally realized I wouldn't change my position and ended up leaving. Since then, my father and stepmother have been calling me incessantly. Sometimes they yell at me, call me selfish, and on other occasions they say I'm not being a good older sibling. As the eldest, I should be able to alleviate some of their burden, especially when I have the means to do so. They claim they deserve a little privacy after raising so many children. However, all their reasons don't convince me. I have the right to enjoy my house and decide who can live there. Furthermore, we all lived in that small house until I moved out a few months ago, so it can't have shrunk that much. I hope that with time, they can understand and respect my decision. I am willing to maintain a healthy relationship with them, but that doesn't mean giving up my privacy and the things I have achieved. The house my grandmother gave me is a valuable gift, not just for its material value, but also as a space that represents my independence and freedom. Update. I'm impressed with all your responses here on Reddit. Thank you for your advice and opinions. After reading all of them, I realized that it's not my obligation to raise their children. And I shouldn't feel guilty about the situation. It's not like I asked to have so many siblings. I called my father and said everything I needed to say. I told him how he treated me poorly since the step-siblings moved in, and how my needs and preferences have always been put on the back burner compared to theirs. I felt like I was alone in this world. He refused to accept it, and was very dismissive of what I said, saying that I was just being emotional. His response hurt me, but at least now I know where we stand. I told him that the relationship is over if he doesn't want to act like my father, and shouldn't make demands when it suits him. I will be installing a security camera soon to know what goes on around my house when I'm not there. Knowing them, they might send more siblings to my doorstep, and I'm no longer willing to have that kind of surprise. I've also decided to leave this behind and maintain minimal contact with my father and his family. You have every right to enjoy the house that was gifted to you by your grandmother. The deed and legal rights are in your name, which means you have control over the space. It's understandable that you value the peace and space that the house provides, especially after the experience of sharing your room and having your needs and desires disregarded in the past. While it's important to consider the fact that your stepmother and step-siblings are going through difficulties, it doesn't mean that you are obligated to sacrifice your own space and privacy to help them. You are not responsible for raising your father's children, and it's understandable that you want to maintain the autonomy and independence that the house provides. Your father's attitude of repeatedly disregarding your wishes and calling you selfish is unfair. A healthy family relationship involves mutual respect and consideration for individual needs. It's disheartening to see you facing such lack of support and understanding from your father. The decision to set clear boundaries, assert your position, and even cut off contact with your father and his family if necessary, seems to be a valid choice in seeking to preserve your own happiness and well-being. By installing a security camera in your house, you are taking steps to protect yourself against potential unwanted intrusions. Overall, I believe you should have the right to live in your house in the way that suits you best, and your decision to establish boundaries and seek distance from a toxic situation is a legitimate form of self-care. Story 2. So, to begin, my son was born with a birth defect and only lived for 3 hours. He had a name, 2 parents who loved him, and now he has a small grave in our local cemetery, buried next to the rest of my family. His twin sister, who was born completely healthy, turned 5 last week. Every year on their birthday, I take the time to visit my son's grave. My wife used to come with me, but last year she didn't. I respected her decision but went anyway. This past week, after I returned from my son's grave, my wife confronted me. She told me she was tired of me living in the past. She said a few things to that effect, but the one that stuck with me most was, "He's dead. Hell, he was barely even alive. I'm sick of you disappearing for hours on our daughter's birthday night. I'm starting to think you love him more than me or her." To clarify, I always go after our daughter goes to bed. I was horrified. I had no idea she felt that way. Then I was furious with her for that barely alive comment. I'm ashamed to admit that I shouted at her, and now she's staying with her parents. I've apologized for my outburst via text, but she hasn't responded. Her unwillingness to communicate with me makes me think I might have done something unforgivable. It is understandable that you want to honor and remember your deceased son by visiting his grave on his birthday. It's a way to keep his memory alive and to cope with your grief. However, it's important to remember that your wife is also dealing with the loss of your child and may be feeling the need to move forward and focus on the present and future. Communication is fundamental in a marriage, especially when it comes to such delicate emotional issues. It's important that you both openly discuss your feelings and needs and try to find a compromise that works for both of you. Perhaps you can find other ways to honor your son that don't involve disappearing for hours on your daughter's birthday, and your wife can try to understand and respect your need as a father to remember your deceased son. It's important to remember that grief is an individual process, and people experience it in different ways. It's important to respect each other's process and support each other during this difficult time. Story 3. My wife and I have 2 children, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. Our 6-year-old is on the autism spectrum. It goes without saying that this is a very stressful situation, and neither of us gets very much of a break from this. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, and I have a full-time job. As happy as our children make us, I don't think it's selfish for us to both desire breaks. We get them every here and there, but we made a deal to have 2 guaranteed breaks in a year, our birthdays and Mother's Father's Day. On those days, one parent takes on the brunt of the burden so the other can get a day to relax. Since our youngest was about 2, we've practiced this. I have never failed to give my wife the day off she deserves. I'll schedule her a spa day or something she really wants to do and get her out of the house so she can relax while I'm on daddy duty. Then when she gets back, our kids give her cards and gifts, and we get a meal from her favorite place after they go to bed. My wife has been less consistent and doesn't really do as much as I do for her. The last year she hasn't really done anything. I typically try not to hold it against her as it is undoubtedly hard, but it does feel kind of unfair. This Father's Day, I planned something for myself as she made no indication of doing something for me. I warned her a week in advance, and she said it was okay. When I told my mother about it, she talked to her sister, but she didn't budge. My mother and I agreed that I shouldn't attend the Christmas Eve dinner. I was a bit sad, but I would still see some relatives who I cared about on Christmas Day, like my godfather and half-sister. However, my brother came home from work around 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve and ended up not going in solidarity with me. We spent time together, made shepherd's pie, and watched Home Alone. It was a different Christmas, but we still had a good time. However, I was angry at my aunt, not only for being stubborn, but also for being passive-aggressive about it, and having some other members of the extended family on her side. She posted on Facebook on Christmas Day, "I love the holiday season, but it's sad that not everyone could make it to Christmas Eve at my house and Oliver's. Hope to see everyone next year." Some of my cousins asked why I couldn't just swallow it and go for a few hours. That wouldn't have worked because my mother would have to drive there, drop me off at home halfway, and then return, and she deserves to spend time with the family she rarely sees. I really don't think I'm the bad guy in this story, but my extended family has been cold towards me and my brother this past week. I believe it's important to respect everyone's dietary choices, and I hope that in the future, we can have a more open and understanding conversation about this. You acted justified in deciding not to attend the family Christmas Eve dinner, considering your convictions as a vegan. Even though you offered vegan options to share, your aunt did not allow you to bring food to her house due to concerns about food allergies. You showed understanding by suggesting buying vegan dishes from stores, but even that option made your aunt uncomfortable. Furthermore, when you offered to help convert some of the preparations, she found it stressful. Going without vegan options during an extended event like this would have been challenging for you. Your decision not to attend the dinner was supported by your mother, and although you spent Christmas Eve differently, you still managed to enjoy time with immediate family members. However, your aunt's passive-aggressive Facebook post and the lack of understanding from some other family members may have caused feelings of anger and isolation. It is essential that each individual's dietary choices are respected, and there should be room for a more open and understanding conversation in the future. You are not the idiot in this story. On the contrary, you acted with integrity in standing up for your convictions and seeking a suitable solution for the family event. I hope your extended family can recognize the importance of mutual respect and find ways to address dietary differences in a more compassionate and welcoming manner.